Golkar dan Indonesia. Golkar Institute akan menjadi sekolah pemerintahan dan kebijakan publik pertama dan terbaik yang didirikan oleh partai politik. Golkar Institute, sekolah pemerintahan dan kebijakan publik, sekolah pencetak pemimpin masa depan Indonesia, sumbangsih Partai Golkar untuk Indonesia dan dunia. Begitu banyak perubahan mendisrupsi hidup kita. Begitu juga dalam pemerintahan dan kebijakan publik. Kita membutuhkan pemimpin masa depan yang memahami dinamika zaman. Golkar Institute, sekolah pemerintahan dan kebijakan publik melahirkan pemimpin-pemimpin dengan 3 pilar kemampuan, yakni ekonomi, politik, dan kepemimpinan. Sekolah pemerintahan dan kebijakan publik bertujuan untuk mencetak kader-kader pemimpin dalam bidang pemerintahan dan kebijakan publik demi kemajuan Partai Golkar dan Indonesia. Golkar Institute akan menjadi sekolah pemerintahan dan kebijakan publik pertama dan terbaik yang didirikan oleh partai politik. Golkar Institute, sekolah pemerintahan dan kebijakan publik, sekolah pencetak pemimpin masa depan Indonesia, sumbangsih Partai Golkar untuk Indonesia dan dunia. Begitu banyak perubahan mendisrupsi hidup kita. Begitu juga dalam pemerintahan dan kebijakan publik. Kita membutuhkan pemimpin masa depan yang memahami dinamika zaman. Golkar Institute, sekolah pemerintahan dan kebijakan publik melahirkan pemimpin-pemimpin dengan 3 pilar kemampuan, yakni ekonomi, politik, dan kepemimpinan. Sekolah pemerintahan dan kebijakan publik bertujuan untuk mencetak kader-kader pemimpin dalam bidang pemerintahan dan kebijakan publik demi kemajuan Partai Golkar dan Indonesia. Golkar Institute akan menjadi sekolah pemerintahan dan kebijakan publik pertama dan terbaik yang didirikan oleh partai politik. Golkar Institute, sekolah pemerintahan dan kebijakan publik, sekolah pencetak pemimpin masa depan Indonesia, sumbangsih Partai Golkar untuk Indonesia dan dunia. Begitu banyak perubahan mendisrupsi hidup kita. Begitu juga dalam pemerintahan dan kebijakan publik. Kita membutuhkan pemimpin masa depan yang memahami dinamika zaman.
Ladies and gentlemen, please stand for the arrival of the 14th President of the Philippines, Gloria Macapagal Arroyo. Welcome to Golkar Institute, Madam President. Mabuhay, as they say in the Philippines. Bapak Ibu, tamu undangan, rekan-rekan Golkar Institute, sesaat lagi Presidential Lecture Series akan segera dimulai. Untuk Bapak Ibu yang masih berada di luar lecture hall area, kami persilakan untuk masuk dan menempati tempat duduk yang telah kami sediakan. Good afternoon, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. A warm welcome to Presidential Lecture Series. Kindly make your way to the lecture theater and take your seats as our program will begin shortly. Thank you. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Shalom, Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, may peace be upon us all. Good afternoon, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, selamat datang. Welcome to Golkar Institute's Presidential Lecture Series. Can we have a big round of applause for all of us here today? My name is Puri Anindita. It is such an honor. It is with great pleasure to host this distinguished event. We are deeply honored to be graced by the presence of, can we have a big round of applause to the 14th President of the Philippines, Madam Gloria Macapagal Arroyo. Once again, welcome to Golkar Institute, Madam. We are looking forward to your keynote. Also joining us this afternoon, Chairman of the Governing Board, Golkar Institute, Mr. Airlangga Hartarto. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is always a good idea to begin with positive energy. I would like to invite you to please rise for the national anthem, Indonesia Raya. Return to your seat. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, here as home of ideas, we encourage and foster fruitful knowledge-sharing culture. So to better understand what Golkar Institute is all about, let's see the following video.
Begitu banyak perubahan mendisrupsi hidup kita. Begitu juga dalam pemerintahan dan kebijakan publik. Kita membutuhkan pemimpin masa depan yang memahami dinamika zaman. Golkar Institute, Sekolah Pemerintahan dan Kebijakan Publik melahirkan pemimpin-pemimpin dengan 3 pilar kemampuan, yakni ekonomi, politik, dan kepemimpinan. Sekolah Pemerintahan dan Kebijakan Publik bertujuan untuk mencetak kader-kader pemimpin dalam bidang pemerintahan dan kebijakan publik demi kemajuan Partai Golkar dan Indonesia. Golkar Institute akan menjadi sekolah pemerintahan dan kebijakan publik pertama dan terbaik yang didirikan oleh partai politik. Golkar Institute, sekolah pemerintahan dan kebijakan publik, sekolah pencetak pemimpin masa depan Indonesia, sumbangsih Partai Golkar untuk Indonesia dan dunia. Begitu banyak perubahan mendisrupsi hidup kita. Begitu juga
Golkar Institute maju reformasi.
Saudara-saudara sekalian, untuk menjadi pemimpin masa depan, kita harus tahu apa yang kita harus tuju, yang akan kita tuju. Pemimpin itu ibaratnya adalah seorang kapten kapal, seorang nahoda dari kapal. Nahoda kapal itu harus tahu tujuan dia kemana.
It'll be you and I lose myself tonight.
Saya istri tapi dalam berproses itu harus benar-benar harus sabar dan
Airlangga seorang penjaga. Puisi indah sebagai karya sastra. Hormat saya untuk saudara Airlangga. Membawa ekonomi Indonesia bersama Pak Jokowi lebih sejahtera.
You can feel the lines start to tremble, washing what you know out to sea. Yeah, you can see your life out the window tonight. If I lose myself tonight, it'll be by your side. I lose myself tonight. If I lose myself tonight, it'll be you and I.
Can we hear it one more time for the first School of Government and Public Policy founded by a political party in Indonesia, Golkar Institute. Boleh tepuk tangannya Bapak Ibu sekali lagi untuk kita semua, rumah pertukaran ide. To officially kick off today's session, I would like to invite to the stage Chairman of the Governing Board, Golkar Institute, Mr. Airlangga Hartarto, to deliver his welcoming remarks.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera bagi kita semua. yang saya hormati Excellencies Madam Dr. Gloria Macapagal Arroyo, the 14th President of the Philippines, Honorable Ricardo Saludo, Cabinet Secretary and Head of Presidential Management during President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo, Mr. Francis Manglapus, Vice Chairman of Now Corporation, yang saya hormati Bapak Abu Rizal Bakri, Ketua Dewan Pembina Partai Golkar, Honorable Muhammad Anis Mata, Chairman of Gelora Party. Yang kami hormati Bapak Akbar Tanjung, Ketua Dewan Kehormatan, Bapak Aceh Hasan Sajili dari Golkar Institute, beserta seluruh jajaran. Di sini hadir Pak Erwin Aksa, Pak Rizal Malarangeng, Mbak Putri, Mas Dev, Pak John Kennedy Ajis, kemudian juga hadir Ketua Pak Buya Idris Laina, dan seluruh pengurus yang saya banggakan, tentunya Pak Sekjen yang sengaja duduk di barisan kedua. Welcome to Golkar Institute. It is a great pleasure for me to introduce our speaker today, a respected leader in the Southeast Asia, Her Excellency Dr. Gloria Macapagal Arroyo. She is a good friend of Indonesia, and her political party, Lakas CMD, is a good friend of the Golkar Party. Dr. Macapagal Arroyo is well known as the President of Philippines from 2001 to 2010. In her extended and illustrious career, she has held many strategic positions in the government, including Vice President, Secretary of Social Welfare, Secretary of National Defense, Senator, Speaker of the House Representative, and Chair of the Lakas CMD Party. Prior to joining politics and government, Dr. Arroyo was academic and economist. She has PhD from University of the Philippines, a master from Ateneo de Manila University, and a bachelor from Georgetown University in the US. And from 1977 to 1987, she was teaching economics at the university when President Corazon Aquino asked her to join the government as Assistant Secretary of Department of Trade and Industry. Her career took off, and the rest is history. Dr. Macapagal Arroyo is a great leader for many reasons. As technocrat, well-versed in economics, she improved the economic of the Philippines by creating more jobs, reducing poverty, and increasing the foreign investment. Her presidency is well remembered through the strong economic legacy. Philippine GDP growth during her tenure as president, an average for 5%. That's 2001 to 2008. This is higher than during the previous president, 3.8% under President Aquino, and 3.7% average under President Ramos. She promoted the technology development by increasing the budget for research and innovation, supporting the Filipino scientists and investors, and launching projects such as Philippine Genome Center, the Philippine Science High School System, and automated election system. She strengthened Philippine foreign relations by maintaining good alliance with the US and also pursuing a peaceful dialogue with China and participating in regional organizations such as ASEAN, APEC, and the UN. He also expanded Philippine social welfare and program by providing more public schools. These are some of the reasons why Gloria Macapagal Arroyo is a great leader. She has made a significant contribution to the progress and the prosperity of the Philippines. Therefore, we appreciate that Dr. Macapagal Arroyo last year has recorded 2 excellent lectures from her beautiful home in Filipina for the Golkar Institute and can be accessed through a digital library. Now, I would like to congratulate Dr. Gloria Macapagal Arroyo, and please once again give a round of applause for her. Golkar Institute was established in 2020 with 3 educational pillars such as leadership, politics, and economic. Until now, we are still consistent during using those pillars for our training programs. Since the formation, we have conducted 13 batches of executive education for young political leaders. The latest one was completed 2 weeks ago, and the lecture was, one of the lecturers was the Indonesian candidate for 2024-2029, Bapak Prabowo Subianto. Within less than 2 years, we have 480 alumni, and most of the alumni are below 14 years old. And the one who are attending this, at least they feel young. Many of our alumni are in politics, either member of parliament or as a candidate of 2024 election. But also many of them are professionals, entrepreneurs, academic researchers, and social environment workers, as well as civil servants. Today, Dr. Macapagal Arroyo will be speaking about resilience, an important topic for us all in this period of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. Across countries, we have been working with our colleague in the region of ASEAN. And last week, Indonesia successfully hosted ASEAN Summit. And I think the theme is ASEAN Matters, Epicentrum of Growth. I think the role of President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo in forming the ASEAN is one of the key important. And public lecture is organized to provide us to better understanding the critical role of leadership and resilience in ASEAN. Indonesia and Philippines share the same geographical position as an archipelagic ASEAN, as it differs from the continent ASEAN. So I think, I'm sure that Indonesia and Philippines have a lot of similarity, and we have regional collaborations. And I think the growth of Indo-Pacific, it depends on 2 large ASEAN neighbors, that is Indonesia and Philippines. Without further ado, I would like to invite Her Excellency Dr. Gloria Macapagal Arroyo, a great friend for Indonesia and Golkar. Let's once again give a round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Airlangga, for your very, very kind introduction. And thank you also for introducing Golkar Party to us foreigners. I would also like to greet Mr. Muhammad Mata, Chairman of the Gelora Party. We are namesakes because your party is Galora and my name is Gloria. And of course, I want to greet the various leaders of Golkar Party and the parties in your coalition that is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Congratulations. And to our students, our trainees in this institute, you are batch 13, I understand. Congratulations on being here in the Golkar Institute. Well, I certainly would like to begin by congratulating Golkar for establishing this institute. I understand it is the first formal training ground for future leaders in Indonesia that is being set up by a political party. How admirable, because there is no better way to sustain the development of one's country than to train young people, and you are very young people, less than 40 years old, with potential in the rudiments of politics, economics, and transformative leadership, as we saw in your audiovisual. So to you, the younger generation, whether you are with the Golkar Party or civilians, you will be the next generation leaders of Indonesia. And I greet you with a resounding mabuhay, as our mistress of ceremony said earlier, as they say in the Philippines. So mabuhay to all of you. Thank you, Chairman Airlangga, for inviting me once again to speak before Golkar. As Chairman said to you earlier, dear audience, I have spoken twice before in Golkar, but the two times were online, by Zoom, by video, during the pandemic. It was the series on resilience. First, I spoke about resilience in the pandemic, because of course we had a pandemic. And at that time, I shared the experience of the Philippines when there was another pandemic when I was president, that was SARS. The second time I spoke about resilience in the context of the South China Sea issue. That is still an issue today, but at least, thank God, I already talked about it before. I don't have to talk about it again today. And so today, I decided that we will again talk about resilience. And this time, it's different from the other two times. One difference is that we are now meeting face to face. I see you, I didn't see my audience the first two times around. And the second is that we are meeting at a time when the campaign for the Indonesian presidential election is entering into full swing. What an important time for the political history of Indonesia. And I'm glad that Golkar had the time to have this academic exercise even in the middle of so many political exercises. But it's election time. And so I decided, if I'm going to talk about resilience, I would talk about a topic that in my country has become very political over many periods of time, the issue of rice. The issue of rice supply and rice prices. It's a very political issue in my country. I think it's a political issue all over our region. And that's what I want to talk about today. I want to share some of the things that I did when I was president regarding the rice issue. The policies and programs to address the issue do not need to be reinvented. The decisive factor will be implementation, meaning executive management, meaning action. You know, my cabinet secretary, Rick Saludo, told me what Golkar means. Is this true, Chairman Airlangga? Golkar means the action party. So, action is the important thing because the responses to a rice crisis are standard, but action is the important thing. Why am I going to talk about rice at a time like this? It is because today, as we speak, there is global anxiety over the price of rice and over the supply of rice. It's the same thing, more or less, as what happened a decade and a half ago in 2007 and 2008. At that time, rice prices became 3 times higher in a few months. And so I was president then. And what did I do at that time? That's what I want to share with you. But today, before I go to that, what I did in my time, let's talk about today. How did we end up now facing a global rice crisis? I think to explain this, I will quote an article in Al Jazeera of August 16th. The article reminds that on July 20, 2023, after Russia pulled out of the Black Sea Initiative that would have allowed Ukraine to ship its grain to the world market, India decided to impose a ban on its exports. So, on the exports of white rice. Now, since September last year, though, India had already banned the export of broken rice. And why did India do that after Russia stopped the export of grain from Ukraine? India gave domestic reasons. Food prices were rising in India, inflation became high, and El Nino was upon India, therefore there was a rice shortage. And the demand was high because the country was heading into a festive season and election season. So in India, the festive season begins in September. That's when people get married. And then there are many festivals. So therefore, there's a lot of demand for food. Also in November, 2 states will have legislative elections. And in December, another 2 states will have legislative elections. So you need to have prosperity and therefore a big demand for food. So India's reasons for the ban were domestic, but their impact has been global. Why? Because India is the world's largest exporter of rice. In 2022, it accounted for 40% of global rice trade. And because of that, the International Monetary Fund warned of rice inflation. Even India's exporters themselves knew that there would be inflation. One big rice exporter was quoted as saying, earlier, rice was trading for $550 per metric ton. Now it's $650 per metric ton. And global rice prices have increased by 15 to 25% since India stopped exporting rice. Worst hit are 4 countries in Asia, like Bangladesh and Nepal, and also in Africa, like Benin, Senegal, Togo, and Mali. And in the Philippines, and I think even Indonesia, but you know better than me, agriculture is also being hit by climate change conditions. That is so crucial because rice from Asia accounts for 90% of global production. I mentioned India, 40% of total trade. Thailand is the world's second largest exporter after India. And so now it's rushing to shore up supplies. Vietnam, the 3rd largest exporter. Rice prices are the highest they have been in 15 years. So exports from Vietnam are skyrocketing because they see there's demand all across the region. And 90% of the Philippines' rice imports in 2022 came from Vietnam. So we are very dependent on Vietnam rice. So naturally, the price of rice in the Philippines has been going up. Therefore, last August 31st, the Philippines imposed price controls on rice. The price ceiling mandated a maximum of 72 cents per kilo for regular milled rice and 79 cents for well-milled rice. That's the response of the Philippines for today. I go back to my time, 2007 to 2008. Let's go to a graph of that period of time. In July 2007, Vietnam restricted rice exports. Why? Because by July, what they had exported was already the total of their program for the whole year. So, slow down rice exports. And when that happened, India banned rice exports in October 2007, same as now. And then Vietnam banned exports altogether in February 2008. So there was a global rice crisis in 2008. Many of you are young, maybe you don't remember. But I was president, so I cannot help but remember. It was a time of great crisis in our country. And at that time, not only grain, but fuel prices were skyrocketing. Rice was $1,000 a ton, and corn was being used for ethanol rather than for food. So that raised the price of rice, wheat, and corn. U.S. corn became $720 a bushel, and Texas crude also peaked at $140 a barrel. So there was a global grain price surge. So in the Philippines, prices also rose. And yet, ironically, at that time, our rice was the highest production in over a decade because my government had invested in hybrid rice. And but because there was a global price increase, that surge led to speculative hoarding. So the price of rice went up, even the supply was high because of hoarding. So what did we do? My agriculture secretary, Arthur Yap, a former economics student of mine, imported rice, partly through government-to-government contracts by the National Food Authority, or NFA. We bought 60% of our rice needs very early because we saw it coming. And because we bought it early, you know, the favor goes to those who enter the party early. We bought at a good early price. Then later in the buying season, prices started going up, the supply started going down, and the only countries that ended up being able to supply rice reasonably were Thailand and Vietnam. We had a good relationship with both. But because we buy a lot of rice from Vietnam, I even called up the president of Vietnam because they were already restricting exports. I said, you know, we've been trading for so long, and we'll continue to trade even beyond the crisis. Please do not stop your exports of rice to the Philippines. And he did that. So we were able to secure the balance of our import needs from Vietnam, still at a good price. Eventually, the Philippines was the record importer that year, 2.3 million tons. But the NFA released affordable rice to the market. Rice was stable at 49 cents per kilo. I don't think we've ever seen the price of rice as low as that ever since. Secretary Yap, my agriculture secretary, told me that many traders asked him, don't release the NFA rice, wait for us to dispose of our stocks. But he refused. He flooded the stores and the hoarders lost a lot of money. So that's my experience in 2008. What resilience lessons can I share from that and other rice crises? One lesson, the government in 2008 had ample market clout to defeat and deter speculators. Because speculators will always try to treble profits by holding on to stocks when prices are going up so they can have future gains. But they couldn't do that so much because we had market clout, especially in areas that were likely to suffer shortages like typhoon regions and urban areas far from farms. We kept ample stocks all the time rather than waiting for the prices to rise up before rushing to import. Of course, there will also be both recurring and as well as unexpected developments driving up prices, like weather patterns and market swings. Weather patterns affect harvests. They can change, and even extreme events can cause shortages. And expect occasional global and local market swings, like the rise in world corn prices due to ethanol production. What happened today, for instance, Russia holding on to the Ukraine grain, India therefore exporting a ban on exports, market swings. And when you have challenges in market power, what happens? Speculative trading, especially in basic commodities like rice. Because we, in Southeast Asia, we buy rice no matter how much the cost. So, in 2017, for example, the NFA had about $40 million. They used it to pay their debts rather than buying rice. So what happened as a result of that? There was a limited harvest in the first half of the year. So again, speculative hoarding and profiteering. Some observers even wondered if traders had colluded with NFA insiders to deplete the agency stocks. Let's go to current events again. Last April, before the ban, an agricultural official reported that the NFA inventory was down to 2 days of national consumption in the government warehouse. But in private houses, private warehouses, traders, there was still enough for 39 days. And domestic harvests were also up 6%. Just like in my time, domestic harvests were up. And yet, local prices surged. The Department of Agriculture said that it was investigating hoarding and price manipulation. Rice used to be 71 cents. It went up to 99 cents in the mountain city of Baguio. So the agriculture official said, if the prices are like that, 99 cents, that's 56 pesos per kilo, that's not right. We will import if needed. And so now, like what I did in 2007 and 2008, the Philippines is lining up imports from Vietnam and India through government-to-government contracts, which India still allows. To have sufficient rice reserves in the event of supply and market disruption, of course, it's important to boost domestic production. Because if we just keep relying on importation, then we will be subject to the vagaries of the highly volatile global rice trade. An article in 2014 by the New York Academy of Sciences said that international rice market is thin and volatile. Global rice accounts for only 7% of total production. Rice is mostly eaten in the country where it's produced, like Indonesia. Many Asian countries have strict policies on export and import of rice, and the rice trade is highly segmented by variety, processing, and milling. 7% of global production only is traded. So when you have rice exports, they are prey to all manner of disruption in so many nations. So we had to have our own production and agricultural modernization. So early in my administration, I met several times with agriculture agencies including the Land Bank of the Philippines, to implement our Agriculture and Fisheries Modernization Act of 1997, which allocated some $450 million a year for agricultural modernization. The biggest component of which was irrigation, because we don't have any great river system in the Philippines. So I realigned budget outlays in order to provide the $450 million stipulated by law. So we were able to boost food production, and we were also able to reduce poverty. Between 2000 and 2003, poverty went down 2%. That meant 2 million Filipinos graduated from poverty. It also helped that I released the local government share in national taxes, which had been held before my time, so the local governments could also spend money on agricultural production. Farmers in the rice supply chain, like this chart on the screen, also from the New York Academy, they can boost or they can hamper output. So our second resilience strategy in 2008 was enhancing the supply chain by addressing its limitations and failings, especially those that caused major market disruptions. Among the many ways to do so, I'll just cite two that my administration did. One was to facilitate needed farming inputs like seedlings and fertilizer, grain dryers, farm-to-market roads, other post-harvest facilities. So that spurred production, especially among farmers who didn't produce rice before because there were no roads to bring their rice to the market. And speaking of transport, a second key supply chain enhancement was what I called the Strong Republic Nautical Highway. This was an inter-island network of roll-on, roll-off ports connected by quality roads, connecting major islands in our archipelago. This not only lowered the cost of passenger and cargo transport by 30 to 40%, but also made possible much new inter-island trade. For example, one rice producer and trader on Mindoro Island, which is south of our Calabarzon industrial region, had previously shipped her grain first north to Manila, then going down again to her neighbor province of Panay. But with the Strong Republic Nautical Highway, she shipped it straight to her neighboring province of Panay, and therefore she earned more, plus she reduced what she charged her buyers. That was a win-win result replicated all over the country. Now, in the current administration of President Marcos Jr., he had a recent policy that we in Congress empowered by law. He wrote off unpaid agrarian loans by farmers, and he gave land titles to agrarian reform beneficiaries. So that will boost further funding and output for many thousands of farmers. They can use their land for credit, and that will enhance their productivity and the supply chain. A third and widely acknowledged instrument for rice resiliency is science and technology, especially for the supply chain enhancement I mentioned earlier, including the production of rice itself and risk management. They say that between 1966, when the first Green Revolution began, and the year 2000, world population grew 90%, but rice paddy output surged 130%. So we produce rice faster than we produce people, and that's good because of science and technology. On my part in the Philippines, we had our 2008 harvest increase because we had hybrid rice cultivation. And let me talk a bit about this hybrid rice. Our proponent was called Agritech, and they worked with Wan Longping, who was the father of China's hybrid rice. Agritech also has brought its seedlings to Indonesia. And of course, the Philippines has been on the forefront of science and technology in farming with the International Rice Research Institute, or IRI, south of Manila. Incidentally, IRI opened in 1962 when my father, the late Diosdado Macapagal, was president of the Philippines. So I'm very proud of him for that. So we have to look for rice-related technologies, and we must take care of sustainability in this day of climate change and global warming. Water usage is very crucial, and we need rice varieties that thrive in coastal and flood-prone areas. Especially countries like Indonesia and the Philippines, we are archipelagic, and we have many thousands of islands, 17,000 for Indonesia, 1,700 for the Philippines, and many of these face farmland loss because of rising oceans due to climate change. Risk reduction is very important also. And science and technology is important for risk reduction. And it's important to use risk monitoring and management systems, including artificial intelligence. But I think more important than science and technology for risk reduction, a 2012 Asian Development Bank paper says ASEAN can play a major catalytic role in developing the commodities exchange as a viable option for addressing price risk and price volatility in rice. And Chairman Airlangga just mentioned that you have just hosted the ASEAN Summit here in Jakarta. That's auspicious. And during the ASEAN Summit, our president, he's somewhere there in the middle, President Marcos called for ASEAN and its partners in Asia to strengthen regional food security mechanisms. So, whether an ASEAN commodity system is set up, there is also already the ASEAN Security Framework and Plan of Action that was established in 2009 after our 2007-2008 global rice crisis that happened when I was president of the Philippines. And that provides a mechanism for working together in enhancing rice resiliency. Which brings us, therefore, to a further resilience strategy. International cooperation and risk management can help mitigate rice problems. Look at the ASEAN logo. It's about rice. Those are rice stalks. And bound together, they are stronger and they are unbreakable rather than if they were separate. The same thing with the 10 nations of ASEAN. And now I will end with one overarching experience. And this applies whatever the crisis, be it a pandemic, a food crisis, or even a security crisis. For any government to be able to respond, it has to have the fiscal means to do so. Indispensable in responding to the vagaries of volatile food supplies and prices, the government must have ample fiscal space and fiscal resources to quickly mobilize supplies and address scarcity and surges. In my time as president, that's what I did because, as Chairman Airlangga said, I am an economist. And hard as it was, to have ample fiscal resources, I had to increase taxes. And they happened just before the rice crisis of the world. So when the rice crisis came, we had money from our increased taxes. Oh, that may be very unpopular, but at least the people had rice during the global crisis. And those tax reforms gave us the underpinning for resilience during our 2008 rice crisis and even during the 2008 global recession. So that is the last lesson I would like to share. Earlier, I mentioned my father, the late President Diosdado Macapagal. I want to let you young people know that he was the first Filipino leader to dare to be close friends with Indonesia. Why dare? Because that was during the Cold War. And Indonesia was ostracized by the United States. Because they said Indonesia is not for us. Indonesia is non-aligned. And they even told my father, because we are very aligned with America, why are you being close to Indonesia? They're not for us. They're not pro-American. And so my father said, how can I ignore our neighbor in the south? The Philippines and Indonesia are back-to-back neighbors, north and south. And he told the Americans, can I ask you, the United States, not to be friends with Mexico, your neighbor in the south? So you cannot ask me not to be friends with Indonesia, our neighbor in the south. And given that my father was such a close friend of Indonesia, even when it was not fashionable to do so, I would like to end my talk today with something my father often said. And he said, logic can mislead us, but experience never. So today, my talk to you is not about theories, but rather just my experience. And I hope that sharing my experience, not sharing logic, not sharing wisdom, but sharing my experience, I hope my story helps you when you become the leaders of Indonesia in your time and when another crisis arises again, which requires resilience. So mabuhay, terima kasih. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much once again for the 14th President of the Philippines, Madam President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo. Madam President, kindly remain on stage, and I'd like to invite Bapak Airlangga Hartarto to the stage to hand over a token of appreciation accompanied by Bapak Aceh Hasan Shadzili. Indonesia had just concluded its chairmanship in ASEAN Summit this year. It is believed that ASEAN is the epicentrum of growth. It is time to develop, and as the theme says, leadership and resilience in the ASEAN region. May the friendship between Indonesia and the Philippines grow stronger, including our relationship between Golkar and Laka CMD. Boleh rekan-rekan fotografer, rekan-rekan media untuk mengambil kesempatan kali ini diabadikan momen istimewa. Kami juga mohon kehadiran ke atas panggung yang kami hormati Bapak Akbar Tanjung untuk ikut berfoto bersama. Begitu juga dengan Bapak Abu Rizal Bakri, kami persilahkan untuk bergabung ke atas panggung. Bapak Anies Mata, kami persilahkan juga untuk bergabung. Ini adalah sebuah momen istimewa mengingatkan kita kembali persahabatan erat antara Indonesia dan Filipina sudah dimulai jauh hari. Mengutip Madam President bahwa support dari Filipina untuk Indonesia dimulai jauh sejak Perang Dingin atau Cold War. Izinkan kami mengambil jeda untuk mengabadikan momen ini. Dan ini juga adalah bukti partnership antar partai dari Golkar bersahabat dengan Laka CMD. As the world braces for fears over inflation, recession, and geopolitical issues, this is the time to develop leadership and resilience. Thank you so much, Madam President, for gracing us by your presence. Terima kasih sekali lagi kehadirannya Bapak Airlangga Hartarto dan endless supportnya untuk Golkar Institute. Bapak Aceh sekali lagi terima kasih banyak. You may return to your seat. Thank you so much for sharing with us your thoughts, your insight, and your perspective. Again, mabuhay, cheers for both Indonesia and the Philippines. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, excellencies, unfortunately, that's all the time we have today. A sincere thank you to all our esteemed speakers, attendees, and organizing team. On behalf of Golkar Institute, I'm Puri Anindita saying goodbye. See you at the next presidential lecture series. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Sampai jumpa.